this is Trey.
Hey, I'm Reese.
Welcome back to another episode of Haunted Tea Podcast, where we spill the tea about all things paranormal, creepy, and otherworldly. So, we were going to talk to you guys about Christmas ghost stories. Did y'all know that used to be a pretty common pastime? Did you know that, Reese?
I didn't until we started doing the research for this episode.
Well, surprisingly, most people are clueless that Christmas ghost stories were a big thing in Victorian England, too. Have you really paid attention or listened to that one song? It's the most wonderful time of the year.
You know what? I hate Christmas music, so I don't pay attention to any of the lyrics.
Well, in that song, if you really pay attention, you'll hear it in the lyrics. There'll be scary ghost stories. I'd never paid attention to that either.
Mm-hmm.
But that's proof right there that people through the ages enjoyed those stories at Christmas time. Most of the Western population, they no longer care or are aware of the tradition of telling ghost stories at Christmas time, especially over in Victorian England.
Right.
Our modern culture adopted more Halloween and Samhain as the more preferred time of the year to frighten delight with ghostly stories.
Yeah.
And that's the longest night of the year. That was considered the best time. But All Hallows Eve isn't the only time that the veil between worlds is thinnest. Did you know that?
I did not until recently.
Well, the winter solstice is also known to be a time when the veil between our worlds is thin. It gets darker and spookier come the end of December, so this is the perfect time for telling them. And like I said, that was the in thing to do in Victorian England. But they were published in distributed periodicals. Telling supernatural tales, especially during the Christmas season, went from an oral tradition to also a written trend, and that was in part due to the development of the steam-powered printing press during the Industrial Revolution. It made it more easily available and more easily able to be widely distributed. As a matter of fact, you know the classic by Charles Dickens, A Christmas Carol?
Yeah.
That was published in several periodicals after the original publication in book form in 1843. Oh, an interesting side note, he actually paid to self-publish.
Oh, wow.
I bet he would have killed to have the opportunity to submit his work to online sellers with easy click like Amazon.
No shit, right?
A Christmas Carol wasn't the only haunted tale during that time, though. There were many that circulated through stories told by firelight and published for reading pleasure, and they were all inspired by authors with a desire to delight the reader with goosebumps and imagine horror. Dickens may have been a well-known author of paranormal Christmas stories, but during this time period, researchers reported women authors were contributing at least half of them. Some say even 3/4 of them. That's not just Christmas stories I'm referencing, though. That's paranormal fiction in general.
Mary Shelley comes to mind.
Right? Her amazing work.
Mm-hmm.
Victorians were seemingly obsessed with seances, death, and paranormal occurrences, so it doesn't surprise me that haunted Christmas stories were a common part of the season. I wish it was a common part of our culture's holiday season now. I'd like to see it get started and become popular again.
Yeah.
Well, in addition to my reading and research, the Carter House School of Folklore and the Fantastic did an incredible write-up that covers a lot regarding Christmas and ghostly stories. Oh, and if our readers are interested in starting their own ritual of telling Christmas stories around the fire that are full of ghostly and paranormal fun, there's a book I'm going to recommend. You can find it on Amazon. It's called The Valancourt, Valancourt, The Valancourt Book of Victorian Christmas Ghost Stories, edited by Tara Moore. It costs $7.99 for the Kindle edition. There's also 2 other volumes after the original one.
Literally looking that up right now.
I figured I'd give a little excerpt from each of the stories listed in this book and see if our listeners might be interested in getting this book and starting their own tradition.
That's a really good idea. Let's hear it.
So this is the most famous, well-known ghostly Christmas story, A Christmas Carol by Charles Dickens. It was published in 1843, and here's an excerpt from it. Marley was dead, to begin with. There's no doubt whatever about that. The register of his burial was signed by the clergyman, the clerk, the undertaker, and the chief mourner. Scrooge signed it, and Scrooge's name was good upon change for anything he chose to put his hand to. Old Marley was as dead as a doornail. Mind, I don't mean to say that I know of my own knowledge what there is particularly dead about a doornail. I might have been inclined myself to regard a coffin nail as the deadest piece of ironmongery in the trade. But the wisdom of our ancestors is in the simile, and my unhallowed hand shall not disturb it, or the country's done for. You will therefore permit me to repeat emphatically that Marley was as dead as a doornail.
I love Dickens. Like I never really paid attention to this story a whole lot because I'm not like a Christmas person, you know?
Right?
But Dickens is amazing, and now I actually want to go back and read it and actually pay attention.
I love his black and white, don't fuck around, but poetic at the same time style.
Yeah.
So the next story I'll tell you about, it's called The Old Nurse's Story, and that's by Elizabeth Gaskell, and that was published in 1852. It's a tried and true Gothic Victorian ghost story, and it covers a haunted house full of ancestral secrets. Dun 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 dun. Okay, here's a small excerpt from that one. I turned towards the long, narrow windows, and there, sure enough, I saw a little girl, less than my Miss Rosamond, dressed all unfit to be out of doors, such a bitter night crying and beating against the window panes as if she wanted to be let in. She seemed to sob and wail, till Miss Rosamond could bear it no longer, and was flying to the door to open it when, all of a sudden and close up upon us, the great organ pealed out so loud and thundering, it fairly made me tremble. And all the more when I remembered me that, even in the stillness of that dead cold weather, I had heard no sound of little battering hands upon the window glass, although the phantom child had seemed to put forth all its force, and, although I had seen it wail and cry, no faintest touch of sound had fallen upon my ears. Whether I remembered all this at the very moment, I do not know. The great organ sound had so stunned me into terror, but this I know. I caught up Miss Rosamond before she got the hall door opened and clutched her and carried her away, kicking and screaming, into the large, bright kitchen where Dorothy and Agnes were busy with their mince pies. Wow, that sounds interesting.
Yeah, definitely.
So the next one is called Horror, A True Tale by John Berwick Harwood. That was published in 1861. It starts slow, but eventually it builds to a hair-raising tale. I have heard since then of the Scottish belief that those doomed to some great calamity become fey, and are never so disposed for merriment and laughter as just before the blow falls. If ever mortal was fey then, I was so on that evening. Coming up next is called Bring Me a Light by Jane Margaret Hooper, published in 1861. This is a tale of Lady Henrietta. She's a woman of evil, inflicting bad luck and misfortune upon her future generations through evil acts. She paced to and fro, turning and returning, with savage, stealthy quickness. The day waned and night began. Her servant came to see if she were wanted and was sent away with a haughty negative. She's busy with some wicked thought, murmured the old woman. Ooh, that's enticing.
Yeah, it is. I like that one too.
I'd like to know all of the evil acts that she enacted to mess with her future ancestors.
Yeah.
The next one is The Ghost's Summons by Ada Bisson, published in 1868. It was one of my faves. I didn't read all of them, but this is one of my faves that I've read. It's a physician that was retained to attend the dying of a patient on their deathbed. My rising sign is Scorpio, and so a lot of my life lessons are around death and sex. Thank God it's not at the same time.
I mean, that'd be a whole different podcast.
Okay, so here's the excerpt from this one. Would you be willing to earn 1,000 pounds? 1,000 pounds? His words seemed to burn my very ears. I should be thankful if I could do so honestly, I replied with dignity. What's the service required of me? A peculiar look of intense horror passed over the white face before me, but the blue-black lips answered firmly, to attend a deathbed. Man, $1,000 just to attend someone's deathbed? Nothing could go wrong there, right?
Trying to figure out like what kind of deathbed this is.
Right? Okay, so the next one is called The Kit Bag by Algernon Blackwood, published in 1908. Tells the tale of why it might be a really bad idea to defend a murderer. It could be likened, I don't know, maybe to assuming that taking care of a rattlesnake ensures its loyalty and kindness. So the excerpt goes, it's difficult to say exactly at what point fear begins, when the causes of that fear are not plainly before the eyes. Impressions gather on the surface of the mind, film by film, as ice gathers upon the surface of still water, but often so lightly that they claim no definite recognition from the consciousness. Then a point is reached where the accumulated impressions become a definite emotion, and the mind realizes that something has happened. With something of a start, Johnson suddenly recognized that he felt nervous, oddly nervous. Also that for some time past the causes of this feeling had been gathering slowly in his mind, but that he had only just reached the point where he was forced to acknowledge them.
All of these I'm making note of so I can go back and read the whole thing.
Between the Lights, that was written by E.F. Benson, published in 1912. Basically, it's about Christmas games competing with madness. A surefire way to feel good about your own mental health, anyway. All right, here's from this one. Well, let us say for the moment that it was not a dream exactly, but a hallucination. Whichever it was, in any case, it haunted me. For months, I think. It was never quite out of my mind, but lingered somewhere in the dusk of consciousness, sometimes sleeping quietly, so to speak, but sometimes stirring in its sleep. It was no good my telling myself that I was disquieting myself in vain, for it was as if something had actually entered into my very soul, as if some seed of horror had been planted there. And as the weeks went on, the seed began to sprout, so that I could no longer even tell myself that that vision had been a moment's disorderment only. I can't say that it actually affected my health. I did not, as far as I know, sleep or eat insufficiently, but morning after morning I used to wake, not gradually and through pleasant dozing into full consciousness, but with absolute suddenness, and find myself plunged in an abyss of despair.
That felt really like Edgar Allan Poe, you know?
Yeah, it was like a punch to the gut of, you better wake up. You better be paying attention.
Yeah, that's kind of how I was seeing it.
Okay, the next one is called The Dead, and that's by James Joyce, published in 1914. Not really a haunting in this one, but hauntingly reminiscent of a dead younger man's ruminations. A few light taps upon the pane made him turn to the window. It begun to snow again. He watched sleepily the flakes, silver and dark, falling obliquely against the lamplight. The time had come for him to set out on his journey westward. Yes, the newspapers were right. Snow was general all over Ireland. It was falling on every part of the dark central plain, on the treeless hills, falling softly upon the bog of Allen and farther westward, softly falling into the dark, mutinous Shannon waves. It was falling, too, upon every part of the lonely churchyard on the hill where Michael Furey lay buried. It lay thickly drifted on the crooked crosses and headstones, on the spears of the little gate, on the barren thorns. His soul swooned slowly as he heard the snow falling faintly through the universe, and faintly falling, like the descent of their last end, upon all the living and the dead.
I've always liked James Joyce, but I didn't know about this one.
Yeah, I don't feel like this story would be something that you could lightly tell at the Christmas party.
No, or around the tree.
Now,
It's like candlelight when, on a dark, snowy night.
right. This one is interesting. It's called Smee, S-M-E-E. That's the title. And it's by A.M. Barrage, published in 1931. There's 12 game players in an old house, and they get spooked by the sudden realization that 12 has somehow turned into 13. Have you met the Sangstons? They are cousins of mine, and they live in Surrey. 5 years ago, they invited me to go and spend Christmas with them. It was an old house with lots of unnecessary passages and staircases. A stranger could get lost in it quite easily.
That one actually gave me chills. Like,
It kind of made me think of the Winchester House.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
That's what it made me think of.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking. Ooh.
All right, so the next one's called Dark Christmas by Jeanette Winterson, and this is the more modern. It was published in 2013. A much more modern tale, though. I mean, let's start that over. This one is called Dark Christmas by Jeanette Winterson. It was published in 2013, and it's a much more modern tale. Basically, it's about a Christmas vacation becomes less than ideal when they discover a manger in an empty attic. It includes ghostly footsteps and occurrences. But here's a little reading from it. We are lucky, even the worst of us, because daylight comes. It was a brooding day, that 21st of December, the shortest day of the year. Coffee, coat on, car keys. Shouldn't I just check the attic? The second set of stairs was narrow, a servant's staircase. It led to a lathe and plaster corridor barely a shoulder width wide. I started coughing. Breathing was difficult. Damp had dropped the plaster in thick, crumbling heaps on the floorboards. As below, there were 3 doors. 2 were closed. The door to the room above my room was ajar. I made myself go forward. Seems interesting.
Yeah, it does. So I just added, like 8 books to my reading list?
I think I've read 5 of them, so I have 3 more to go.
Are these like long stories or like novels, or are they short stories that you could tell like around a fire?
They're stories that you can tell around the fire at Christmas time.
Okay, makes it a little bit easier. So my research, I went a lot further back than Victorian times.
I went all the way back to oral history times.
The pastime of telling spooky tales has spanned literally thousands of years all around the globe. When the long winter nights meant that it wasn't possible to wake up early and stay out until dark to tend to the crops and the animals. So people were huddled around candlelight, retelling local ghost stories. The oral history of ghost stories goes back so much further than any of us could ever possibly imagine. They span cultures and religions and periods of time all across the globe. Ghost stories and Christmas, I found, have been around since before Christmas even existed, way back thousands and thousands of years ago in the pagan days of Yule.
So the Victorians had nothing on all these people in the way back past.
No, well, I mean, we know that, a lot of the Victorian Christians stole from the pagans, but this is yet another example. So while the pagans were celebrating the solstice in the deepest, darkest winter nights, their traditions believed that there was a ghostly procession going across the sky that they called the Wild Hunt. This lore spanned various northern European countries all throughout ancient and medieval and even early modern European times. It made its way into Scandinavian and Norse culture. And the Wild Hunt said to appear at various times of the year, including Halloween, but it's most commonly spoken of as the winter season because it's believed that this is the time of year where supernatural visitations were most common. Specifically, the spirits of the dead were allowed to return, which is interesting to me, but it does make sense because you've got the long winter nights, and I know here where we live, like winter is the wet season. So constant storms and winter storms and thunder and lightning. So I can definitely tell how they would feel that way.
Yeah, there are some reports too, if you think about it. That's one of the reasons that they wanted to, they say Christ was actually born, Jesus was actually born in August, and for some reason they moved it to December. And it's really fascinating to me too, because that's one of the other times that the veil being so thin, why did they want that to become known as a Christian holiday? And it's like they were trying to distract pagans from celebrating the thin veil. They were trying to distract that with turning that into a holiday for Jesus' birth. Do you understand where I'm going with that?
Yeah, well, they took all of the pagan holidays and they found ways to kind of superimpose over them to where it wasn't so much celebrated as pagan,
right?
But as Christian and
right,
continued across other religions.
Yeah, and that's where they got the word holiday from, because it was pagan holy days, and they turned them into holidays.
Huh? I didn't know that. Interesting. So the Wild Hunt, They said it's comprised of spectral huntsmen thundering across the sky with their ghostly steeds and hounds and bird companions, and that they're often escorted by fairies and elves and even demons and these devilish beings in the hunting party. Depending on who's telling the story, the party can be led by Odin, that's the pagan god of war and death, who was doomed to hunt down and kill supernatural beings until the end of time. Some say that, I'm going to butcher this, Nick Ruprecht, one of St. Nicholas's companions, and we're going to talk about jolly old St. Nick here in a little bit, but some say that he led the hunt, and still others swear that the wild hunt was led by the devil himself. They were said to have been hunting the souls of female demons, or in some cases, a heart. It was thought that humans who witnessed the wild hunt would forebode some catastrophic like war or famine or plague, or at best, only the death of the person who witnessed it. They feared that encountering the hunt could cause them to be abducted into joining the hunt, or even kidnapped away to the underworld or the fairy kingdom to be killed or never seen again. And it was even believed that the souls of sleeping humans could be pulled away to join the chase. So during those dark, stormy, long winter nights, as the wild hunt crashed across the sky with thunder and lightning, people were encouraged to hide and to make themselves as invisible as possible. And so they quietly huddled together and told ghost stories in the darkness to pass the time. Makes perfect sense to me. So thousands of years after the wild hunt had become what it was, in what's now known as modern-day southwest Turkey, there was this monk named Nicholas of Myra. He was born around 280 AD. He's the one that became known as Saint Nicholas, and he was revered for his piety and his selflessness, and he gave away all of his inherited wealth to travel the countryside and help the poor and sick. He was known for saving these three sisters from being sold into slavery or prostitution by paying the dowry to their father so that they could be married off and spared that awful fate. And as he continued to travel the country and help people, he became more and more popular. And he eventually became known as the protector of children and sailors. He died on December 6th, and he was so loved that the Dutch turned that day into a feast day to celebrate his life. It was eventually considered to be a lucky day to get married or make large purchases. I have no idea why that was associated with St. Nicholas, but it was. But by Renaissance times, St. Nick was the most popular saint in Europe. And even during the Protestant Reformation, when venerating saints was being actively discouraged, he still managed to maintain a positive reputation, especially in Holland. So the Dutch had initially called him Sinterklaas, a nickname of Sint Nicolaas or St. Nicholas. The lore there was that badly behaved children were beaten with a single switch or a bunch of sticks. How did Sinterklaas know which children were good and which were bad? Long forgotten and going out of style fast was his companion Zwarte Piet, otherwise known as Black Peter. He was always watching and relaying to Sinterklaas the activities and behavior of both good and bad children, and then following that up with distributing candy to the well-behaved children and punishment to the badly behaving children. The belief in and homage to Sinterklaas's companion has fallen out of favor and is now widely considered to be a repugnant and a racist activity. So, while the feast of Sinterklaas was alive and well in Europe, he didn't make his way to the Americas until 1773, when a New York newspaper reported that a group of Dutch families had gathered to honor the anniversary of his death. In 1804, John Pintard, a member of the New York Historical Society, distributed these little wood cuttings of St. Nick at the Society's annual meeting. And on the background of those wood cuttings was an engraving depicting images of stockings filled with toys and fruit hanging over the fireplace. In 1809, Washington Irving wrote a book called The History of New York, where he referred to St. Nicholas as the patron saint of New York. Sinterklaas began being described as everything from a rascal with a blue three-cornered hat, red waistcoat, and yellow stockings, to a man wearing a broad-brimmed hat and a huge pair of Flemish trunk hose. By 1820, Christmas was beginning to be associated with gift-giving, mainly centered around children, and stores were starting to advertise Christmas shopping. By the 1840s, so within 20 years, we started to see entire separate newspaper sections for holiday advertisements, and it was often featuring images of the now popular Santa Claus. In 1841, the first life-size Santa Claus model was displayed in a Philadelphia shop, and literally thousands of children and families came to visit. Stores used this to their advantage, and suddenly they were all advertising the chance to come and see and meet a real live Santa.
And we wonder how this season became so commercialized.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's exactly it right there. It was using the image of Santa Claus as a way to get families in to buy things that started to perpetuate this whole like Christmas needs to be thousands and thousands and thousands of dollars of candy and toys and all these good things for good little girls and boys. And this is where it started. So by 1865, the Salvation Army was born. And in addition to some of the other charity work they were doing, they started handing out these free Christmas meals to needy families. In the early 1890s, they started struggling to afford these meals. So they started dressing up unemployed men in Santa Claus suits and sending them out into the streets of New York to solicit donations. You literally can't go to a Walmart anywhere around Christmas time today without seeing them.
That and Girl Scout cookies.
Yep. Well, I mean, if they had them at the same time, then they'd probably take over the world, honestly. But
You'd see Santa Claus attacking the Girl Scouts to get their cookies.
probably, I didn't even think about that. Oh my god. I mean, a bloodbath. It'd be worth
Give me your cookies.
Oh my god, I think somebody needs to make that into a skit.
Got to do it.
So I can almost guarantee, no matter your religion or culture or upbringing, if you're in America today, you've been exposed to the Jolly Fat Man in the red suit with a sleigh led by magical reindeer at least a handful of times in your life. Does that remind anyone of the Wild Hunt? While America's Christmas has become more hallmarky than spooky over the years, while still retaining some of the original Yule traditions, the pagan roots are strong. But without bad, there's no way to compare what good actually is. So we're going to talk about Santa's evil counterpart, Krampus. Krampus is basically the anti-Santa. I feel like he's probably got some roots in the Black Peter.
Yeah, I find it interesting that Zwarte Piet or Black Peter is black and then Krampus is also black.
Yeah, I feel like one was definitely based off the other. So Krampus is said to be, instead of human, he's a half-goat demon that's said to be the son of the Norse god of the underworld. He punishes naughty children at Christmas time, and he's often depicted carrying birchwood sticks to beat them. He's said to have pointed devilish horns and a long snake-like tongue. His body is covered in coarse fur, and he looks like a goat crossed with a demon with cloven hoof prints, often identifying his entrance. His body and arms are strung with chains and bells, and he carries a large sack or basket on his back to cart off evil children. If you're lucky, you might just get swatted with a birch branch. If you're not, you'll wind up in the sack. After that, your fate is anyone's guess. The legend suggests you might be eaten as a snack, or drowned in a river, or even just dropped off in hell. Like, hey, here you go.
See ya.
Bye. Sometimes Krampus is accompanied by St. Nicholas, who isn't known to bother himself with naughty children in Central Europe. Instead, he focuses on handing out presents to the well-behaved kids and then leaves the rest up to a sinister counterpart. Today, Krampus has his own celebration on the day before the Feast of St. Nicholas in the Alpine region. So every evening on December 5th, a night called, is it Krampusnacht? I can't pronounce anything German. Krampusnacht.
Krampusnacht.
Elegantly dressed St. Nics pair up with monstrously outfitted Krampuses to make the rounds to homes and businesses, offering gifts and playful threats. Some people exchange that word, Krampusnacht, greeting cards that depict the horned beast alongside festive and funny messages. Sometimes large groups of people dress up as Krampus and run amok through the streets, chasing friends and passerby with birch sticks. This activity is especially popular among young men. So I feel like there's a lot of similarities here.
Yeah, I was thinking about that story about the 13 lads
Mhm.
and how kids get visited over in Iceland. They get visited for 13 nights in a row, and it's like a visit from Santa Claus for 13 nights. But each lad has a different name and a different activity that they do. But kids actually leave their shoes in the windowsill.
Hmm.
And they're left candy in their shoe if they've been good. And if they haven't, there's two different stories that I've heard. One, they get beat with sticks, or two, they're just left sticks. And then the 13 lads have a mother called Grilla,
Hmm.
and she would come down from the mountaintops and come down and eat the children that were bad.
Oh shit.
And there is an evil cat that's involved with this story. And apparently that cat will go around and eat children that have not received at least one new piece of clothing. To me, that sounds like it was just an add-on from the parents to make the children grateful that they got clothing instead of candy or toys or treats.
Yeah.
But, what do I know?
I don't know what kind of cat is going around eating kids that don't have new clothes.
Right? Sounds like a crazy cat to me.
Insane. So I don't know. My family, my dad's Puerto Rican, my grandma's Puerto Rican, and so we did Three Kings Day growing up, and that's in January. But it's the story of the three wise men coming to visit, and you leave straw in a box under your bed, and then they come like one night for 3 nights, and you get three different presents, and it's like January 7th, 8th, and 9th.
I always forgot to leave the straw under the bed, but somehow they were still always able to find me.
See, there's a lot of cultures where the kids are making out a lot more with presents than we are over here
Mhm.
in the United States.
Yeah, but I feel like that was their version of not having to have Santa Claus. Instead it was like more along the Christian lines of like these are the wise men that brought Jesus the gifts. So feed our
Mhm.
camels and we'll bring you treats.
Right.
So I don't know. There's so many variations that have Christian undertones that are still going back to the pagans way back when, and nobody wants to acknowledge it.
So we have a couple listener email stories about their Christmas experiences, and I have a couple stories of my own that I'm going to share with you guys.
So we had one listener, her name's Debbie, and she has a husband named Howard, and she wrote in with her story from Christmas time. It says, Howard and I had been married for 6 months when his son Howard Brown III died. He was 18 years old. How sad. We were unaware that he was taking opioid pills. Early the morning of October 29th of 2002, we were awakened by a friend calling the house for little Howard. My husband got up to take him the phone. His bedroom door was locked and he didn't respond to his dad's voice or banging on the door. My husband took the doorknob off and went in to find his son barely alive. He alerted me. I assessed little Howard and knew he needed rescue breathing immediately, and at that moment he stopped breathing and his heart stopped. We put him on the floor and did CPR for 27 minutes until the ambulance arrived. Most people don't realize, but doing CPR is exhausting. It's very physically stressing. Despite extensive efforts by EMT and then hospital staff, he couldn't be resuscitated. Little Howard was living with us due to conflict with his stepdad, who was actually on house arrest for stealing car stereos while high on Xanax. We thought he was doing well, no drugs. He was the silliest, most fun, and kindest human being, always picking and joking, making people laugh. We just always assumed that the paranormal incidents were him letting us know he was okay. It just seemed like something he would think was funny. Also, because of the timing of the incidences, being so close to his death, I never had any negative feelings about the happenings. No vibes of malevolence whatsoever. It came across as playful to us. I will say also that since then, 21 years later, whenever we're planning any social or family gathering, the song that was played during his funeral just happens to come on the radio. The song is Green Day, Good Riddance. Wow, what a story.
As an addict, I definitely feel that we attract a certain amount of paranormal energy. And why wouldn't that continue over into the afterlife?
Right. Yeah, because to me, it's just another form of existence.
Mm-hmm.
What we have, we take with us, not the physical things, of course. But like they say, energy never dies. It simply changes form.
Mm-hmm.
I just really, really hope that memory comes with that. I want to remember.
I can't imagine doing CPR for that amount of time and the physical and mental exhaustion that they must have felt to know that all of their efforts were in vain and he couldn't be saved. I feel like maybe he's staying around because he saw that effort and he recognized it and he wants them to know, like, hey, I'm still here. I'm okay.
Hmm. Yeah, they say that a lot of times that sudden deaths that were unexpected, they're more likely to hang around too because they're more confused than say someone that took quite a while to die,
Mm-hmm.
which I find that to be interesting too.
Yeah, for sure. Well, and this sounds intelligent and not residual. It's not just his energy hanging around afterwards. Like he's there and he wants them to know that he's there.
Right. Right. Yeah, like purposeful and focused. Yeah, like you said, he wants us to know. So we have one listener that sent in a small little story, a very short story about something that happened to him at Christmas time. He said, I witnessed the image of two small children, about 7 years old, hovering above 12 inches of snow in the front yard of a house in Walla Walla, Washington. They were dressed as if they belonged in a snow globe, only the globe was only the glow around them. No tracks in the snow, and it was around 4 a.m. in the morning. They were smiling at me as I turned the corner as my headlights swept across them. It was very surreal. They appeared to be dressed in 1800s clothing, both the boy and the girl.
I mean, I wonder if they were outside looking for Santa's sleigh.
Yeah, you gotta wonder why they were out there in the snow. I do know there's a heavy presence of Scandinavian immigrants there, too.
Interesting. So that could be like, they could have had a house that was no longer there or
Right.
whatever. They could have been sitting around a tree listening to ghost stories.
So I have one story from back in 2014 when I had like more things happening. This was just kind of a small little blip, but it still is Christmas related.
I'll tell the rest of the story on another episode because it's long, but suffice to say, I had just split up with my ex-husband and I was living in Jacksonville by myself. It was just me and Sage was like 2.5, almost 3 at the time because our birthday's in January. So little kid. And we'd had, ever since I moved back in like August of that year, things had started escalating and escalating and escalating. And it got so bad that I wound up moving one of my best friends in with me. And it's actually the same friend who wrote the bass line that's the intro and outro for this podcast. I couldn't live by myself with everything that was happening. And I kept seeing, like, I called him the walking man. He was this looked like he was in the 1940s walking through the house. I saw a burned girl a couple times. There was always things slamming, and
No.
I had venomous snakes at the time. Like they would be kept on top of the refrigerator to keep the kid away, and I'd wake up in the morning and they'd be sitting on the counter in their tanks. So like things like that just kept on and kept on and kept on.
Right.
Everybody that I told was like, "You're on drugs. Like you're imagining everything. None of this is real. Like you're crazy." So I got to the point where I didn't want to be there by myself anymore. And so anybody that was willing to spend the night with me, I had the whole house locked up. We had the master bedroom. Me and Sage slept in one queen size mattress. I had another queen size mattress in the room with me so that I didn't have to leave the room at night because I was scared. There was too much that was going on. So I moved my friend with me and he was also on drugs. I mean, that's what we did. But there was one night that we were coming home and the way the house was set up, like you come in through the garage, you walk straight from the garage into the kitchen. And then from the kitchen, if you turn left, there's the dining room in the front of the house with windows that look out towards the front. And if you turn right, there's a living room type area with like a sliding glass door that led to the back door. And then there's a hallway at the very end that goes to the 3 bedrooms and then the guest bathroom. And so we were coming in and we came in through the garage. We had the Christmas tree in the corner of the living room. So like turn from the garage into the kitchen, go through the kitchen and the tree's right there. And there's also like a little bar area, like with the window, the pass through so you could see from the kitchen into the living room. So we're walking in, we look over and there's 3 people standing around the tree. And they just look like carolers, and they're just standing there like shoulder to shoulder. It was a small tree, like maybe 4 or 5 foot, plastic tree, whatever. And so they're standing there in that corner, shoulder to shoulder,
Right.
and they look like carolers, and they're looking up, and their mouths are open, but they were like ethereal, like they weren't true solid people. Like it was obvious that they weren't true solid people. Both looked at each other and were like, "Did you fucking see that?" And he's like, "Who the fuck are they?" And I was like, "I don't know." And we look at each other, and by the time we look back at the tree, they're gone. And so, like, I had a lot of things that I was trying to make sense of what was happening in that house at the time. And I do think that my addiction was part of why the activity was as bad as it was.
Oh, you're just crazy. You were just on dope. Oh, well. But what a lot of people don't realize is that when you alter your state, when you alter the state that you're in, it opens you up to be receptive and to really be able to immerse yourself in that existence, in that realm.
Yeah. I mean, I was going through a divorce, so not only was I an addict, but there was a lot of violence, there was a lot of anger, there was a lot of sadness, there was a lot of hurt, there was a lot of negative things. We'd done Ouija in that house when I was a teenager, so like I not only was I more open to it, but it was being attracted with everything that was going on in there. We're gonna have to do like a whole separate episode for everything that happened in that house because it was just wild. But at one point, my dad and my parents lived next door, and I kept telling my dad, like, dude, there's stuff happening, like I'm scared. And he was like, yeah, you're on drugs. So eventually something happened that was bad enough that he called in a friend that was a preacher, and the guy came over, blessed the house, and left me with a bottle of holy water. And I still have that holy water to this day.
Didn't you want to ask your dad what drugs he was on?
Yeah. I don't remember what the actual breaking point was when he was like, I believe you. But it was bad for a while. And when the preacher came and he, blessed everything, it went away for like 2 days. And then it was just back worse than ever because it was pissed off that we were trying to get rid of it.
Mm-hmm.
So that's one of my Christmas stories. But what's funny is
For the last couple weeks, we put, I don't know how many pleas out there to our listeners and friends and family and strangers on Reddit and everywhere else begging for Christmas ghost stories. And we really had to do some deep diving because we didn't really get a lot of responses. And it wasn't until we started working on the episode that Nick reminded me that we had an encounter last year on Christmas Day. And we've had so many experiences since we've moved into this house in October 2022 that like it all kind of blurs together. But this one was more specific.
Yeah, I remember you telling me quite a bit about some of the events happening at your house.
Hmm. So we're on the side of a mountain in Appalachia. So there's already a lot of old history here, a lot of native history.
Mm-hmm.
And because of where we are on the mountain, there's also nothing but rock underneath our feet. So everything kind of bounces. Like even cell phone signals bounce. So it's impossible to get service out here. Like that's how the energy is moving too. So we started having experiences literally the first couple days that we lived here. And we didn't find out until months after we lived here that the house that we're in now was originally a cabin. Somebody had bought the cabin and added on the front room and like one side of the house and then the sunroom in the back, then, to put the roof over the top of it. But the original cabin is like my dining room and the office that I'm sitting in right now and our kitchen. That was the whole original building. So the front room was added on, and you come in the front room, you come in the front door, and it's this massive room, like probably 20 by 30 feet. It's just huge, 12-foot ceiling. And that's where like I see the majority of things in this house is in that room and in the dining room, the main cabin part.
Isn't that where you have your Christmas tree?
Yes, it is. And the Christmas tree does seem to kind of bring in a little bit of extra energy, but nothing like what happened. So we've done multiple paranormal investigations in this house, in this area, on this property, and we almost always yield results. And it's gotten to the point where I don't have solid proof, but I feel like there's a portal And I feel like that portal is in that front room. So Christmas Day last year, we've got the tree in the front corner of the house by the door facing the front of the house. And then there's windows by the front door and then windows on either side of the wall. There's 2 and 2. And we have our lizard tanks are under each one of the windows. If you're looking out the front door, it's the wall to the left, which faces our carport. So Nick does this Christmas village every year, and he sets up this big 8-foot table, and he's got all his little Christmas villages and buildings and stuff, and the fake snow and all that shit. So last year, Christmas Day, we'd done all the gift wrapping. It was in the afternoon. Nick and Sage are standing there at the Christmas village, and they're playing with something that she got and putting it together. And Nico's on the floor, like right by me, the baby. And so we FaceTime my parents and my daughter
to wish them Merry Christmas.
So I'm standing in the middle of that front room and we're FaceTiming them. And I smoke a vape, my Juul, which produces a cloud of like vapor smoke. So I'm standing there and I'm talking to my mom. I've got the phone in one hand, I've got my Juul in the other, take a hit off the Juul, blow smoke. And right in the middle of the room, when I blew that smoke vapor, it was like somebody had held up a piece of glass in front of me. And so when the smoke hit, it just like kind of bounced back at me and dissipated like when you blow smoke or anything at a piece of glass. It was like maybe 6 inches from in front of my face.
So like a closed portal type of experience, right?
It was like if somebody had taken a glass box and set it down in the middle of the room and then I blew smoke on it, like what you would see.
Wow.
So Nick and Sage have their backs to me at this point, and I'm like, what the fuck? And my mom's like, what? As they turn around, a cardinal hits the window right next to me. And we've had a couple other instances with cardinals since we've moved here. And since Nick's mom passed away in 2015, we've always kind of attributed the cardinal experiences to her.
Mm-hmm.
So, I blow the smoke out, hits this glass, whatever, and then just boom, cardinal. We see like just a flash of red hit the window. So he runs out, runs around the side. It's a cardinal. It just picks itself up off the ground and flies away. And I can't help but think that there might have been something bad there, that bird was distracting us away from or trying to prevent us from messing with further. But we still don't have an explanation to it. We still have no idea what it was. I think it was a portal, though.
See, that's really interesting. What the first thing, the correlation that comes to my mind, you think about how everybody, a good portion of people believe that when people die, cardinals come to visit.
Mm.
And I think about, well, maybe cardinals come to visit others from different realms, or it's our dead loved ones letting us know that they're simply in another realm, and that's why we see cardinals.
Right.
It's just an interesting correlation that I was thinking of when you were telling us that.
We do. I do feel like there's a portal there because of the experiences that we've had when we've done investigations. It's always a different spirit, and it's only in that room. Any other part of the room, it's kind of the same stuff. I don't know. I don't know if we lost his grandma in 2021.
Mm-hmm.
So it could have been her come through and his mom, like, oh my God, that's my mom. I don't know. We still don't have an answer, but every investigation that we've done in that front room, it's like we'll have a spirit for maybe even a couple months, and then they're just gone. And then there's something else that's taken its place, or a couple somebody else's that's taking their places. We've thought that we came in contact with Fae folk at one point. We found out months after we bought the house that the original owner of the property that sold the cabin to the people that made it into the house it is had killed his wife and then himself basically in our backyard right behind our house. And then the guy that bought this place with his wife wound up going progressively crazier in the amount of time that they lived here, to where she took the kids and left, and then he killed his wife and held his landlord hostage like within a month of leaving this place. So I do worry that there's something here that could potentially affect mental illness, and we take a lot of precautions to kind of keep ourselves protected.
Yeah, that begs the question. What have you thought about as far as Do you want to leave that portal open? Do you want to close it?
I don't know. You know, like there's something very, very evil on the property outside to the point where we were going to investigate one night and I was literally in tears and begging Nick, like, I really have a really bad feeling about this. Like, please don't make me go out there. You definitely don't need to go out there by yourself. And there's some nights that I go out there to feed the animals and shit happens. But when it comes to inside the house, it feels neutral. You know, I've had some things come through and say that they're friends, and I'm like, nah, you're yeeted. I don't trust that shit at all. But some of it's just like kind of ambivalent and really lend to that feeling of being evil or overly friendly. So we just kind of let it be. I don't know if portals can be neutral, if that's a thing. Yeah, so I don't know. I don't know. It's wild. Like you need to come out and investigate and see some of this shit. Like it's insane.
I would love to, honestly. I've used the spirit box. Well, I think I sent you the recording
Mm-hmm.
where I reached Drake,
Yes.
but all I got out of it was a mom.
Mm-hmm.
And then the thing stopped working and the spirit box broke.
Maybe he was trying to protect you from coming in contact with something worse.
Maybe it's possible. He was always very protective.
Mm-hmm. He could have known, like, if you keep messing around with this, you're gonna encounter something that's gonna be dangerous. So I got to put a stop to it. So yeah, but that's our Christmas Day escapade.
What a way to celebrate Christmas.
Yeah, no shit. Well, and so the other time that we saw the cardinal was around the same time of year. It snowed Christmas last year, and I've never driven in snow because I'm a Floridian.
Oh, God.
Yeah, like never in my life.
Uh-huh.
So Nick wouldn't let me leave the house unless he was driving. He was like, I don't trust it. Like, we're on a lot of gravel mountain roads. We don't have a 4-wheel drive. He's like, just, you're not fucking driving. Okay. So to get out of our neighborhood, there's like a couple steep, twisty, kind of windy gravel roads. So he and Sage were leaving one day. They just had to go get milk. And they're going up this really steep single lane road just towards the exit of our neighborhood. And he gets about midway up and hits a patch of ice. And they start sliding backwards. And I mean, either way you go, you're going to go off the side of the mountain. And so they're tripping, and he looks over. And right as he looks over to try to look behind him and see if maybe he can at least keep it straight on the road while they're sliding back, a cardinal flies in front of them. And then the car starts going up again, and they got their grip and were able to keep moving forward.
Wow.
But that had to have been his mom.
I'm just wondering what you you said the spirits that come into the house that you think that they're more neutral or good?
They seem to be. Here's what's weird. Okay, so where the dolls are, they've got their own shelf in the room that we spend the most time, which is where the original cabin was. That's the dining room. And so I've seen things that I attribute to them. I saw a little girl standing by a chair a couple weeks ago, scared the ever-loving shit out of me, but thinking back, I think it was one of the girls. And I've seen their orbs. But when we first moved here, there was no activity out of them for at least 6 months. And I had this feeling that there was something here that was preventing them from wanting to be active. There was something here that was scaring them.
And now it's gone?
It's gone. So I called my friend. She's got one of the real SLS cameras, like not just the app, but the actual like $500 camera itself. And so I keep seeing the way that my house is set up is when I lay in bed and I look out the bedroom door, I can see all the way to the front room, to the front window. And in this big doorway right next to where the girl's shelf is, I see this thing peeking around the corner, and it's literally the height of the doorway, which is at least 8-9 feet up off the ground. And so I've seen it many, many, many times. And so finally we did an investigation and we brought the equipment out and we caught him. And so we started doing an EVP session, and we also used the ghost boxes. And he said that his name was Alexander and that he's a neutral.
Oh, that's the good guy.
Hmm. Yeah, that's like the big guy. So we had him for a couple months and we never felt like there was anything bad. And he always said that he looked after the girls, but then he just disappeared. He's been gone since April or May. And it's like when we have an entity in the house that we're aware of and that we can put a name to, the girls seem to like retreat into themselves. Like we can run the EMF detector over them and we'll get little hits here and there, but they're not active. But when we don't have any type of activity, good or bad, in the house is when it seems like they're more willing to come out. So I don't know if they're afraid. I don't know if they're intimidated. I don't know what it is, but they just don't want to do anything when there's something else here.
Interesting.
It's so bizarre. And the sunroom, the sunroom is where I get really bad vibes, and especially because I can see out in the backyard. I can see like where I saw the hooded figure when we first moved in. I can see, which was, I found out later, was the exact spot that the guy had killed his wife and himself. And I can see out towards, like out in the woods, and that's where like some bad shit is. But we never get any hits off of any of the equipment in that sunroom. But that's the room that makes me feel really uneasy.
Sounds like we should do a lot of work. I hope that the stuff that we ordered is going to come in soon.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I emailed them about it because I haven't gotten any tracking information besides tracking, so I'm waiting on them to get back to me.
Well, I'm also talking about the pendants. You need to still pick one and get you one.
Oh. Send me links. Oh, look. We did. I started making everybody carry tourmaline. Everybody wears hematite one way, shape, or form. You know, we have the prayers. Julia is the one that taught me the prayer that all who are evil and mean to do harm must leave and never return. And we use that a lot around here. And you can literally feel the energy shift if there's something that's negative.
Mm-hmm.
You can feel them get angry and resentful of it. But it's like there is some type of protection around the house itself, the interior of the house, that prevents anything truly bad from coming in.
It sounds like you've also got to make up your mind if you want to you want everything to be banished or if you want to leave it be.
Right. I don't want to banish I don't want to banish the girls. I don't want to banish the neutral stuff if it means us no harm, you know, but it might come to a point where we're going to have to make a decision, like either allow it to continue or get rid of everything.
Yeah, because if you've got something open, you're going to have to do some serious daily vigilance in keeping out negative entities.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And it's going to turn into a full-time job.
Yeah. There's something that the baby definitely sees it, and the cats see it. Sometimes the cats will jump up because they sleep in the changing table, which is in the doorway of the other side of that same room. That same front room has 2 doorways. It's so weird.
Mm-hmm.
But the cats sleep on the changing table, which is in the other doorway. And I mean, sometimes they'll jump up like something slapped them. And, you know, they'll just kind of give, like, you know, that look that cats give when something messes with them and they give them like that grumpy side eye.
Yeah.
They'll turn and they'll look in there and they'll give it that look, but they're not like acting aggressive about it.
But leave me alone.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, like who the fuck you think you are kind of look.
Mm-hmm. Didn't you do lots of research too
For the house?
on the house?
We tried. We went to the archives downtown. Everything's paper here. There's no digital archives of any kind. And the only thing that we could find was like the property didn't exist until 1996 when the cabin was bought and built onto the house. There were building permits and there was the purchase, but we can't find who it was purchased from. There's nothing.
Interesting.
Like literally this it's like it just fucking, this cabin dropped out of the sky and then this came into existence.
I wonder if newspapers would have anything on it from way back when.
We looked, everything's microfilm, so you kind of have to know what you're looking for.
Mm-hmm.
We were able to find the information about the guy that killed himself and his wife. And that was pretty much it. At one point, this area was going to be developed into a neighborhood, but it never made it that far. So there was like,
Probably because all the rocks.
yeah. And the creek, the way that they had it set up, like the creek would have been a hindrance. So they built a bridge that's on my neighbor's property, but then it was blocked off because it wasn't viable or some shit. I don't know. But even then, there's not any information about this particular lot or property. We know that this was Cherokee hunting grounds, and we know that part of the Cherokee Choctaw War was fought in this neighborhood, this area. So there's a lot of bloodshed.
I keep thinking about all the stone, and I'm just wondering how much it stores as far as energy.
Yeah, I think that's a big part of it is all of the stone. And we're like not even that, like we're in a holler. So it's like we're down in a bowl and it's just bouncing off every side of the bowl all around us.
Right.
So there's so much going on.
Would you say that you get more activity in the winter or more activity when it's warm?
No, it's in the winter. It's all in the winter. It's like, and we've only spent one summer here, but there was almost nothing all summer to the point where I was like kind of wondering like, what the fuck? Walking outside, there wasn't any kind of fear. But then last March, was it March? It might have been later. It might have been like April. It was still freezing cold outside. Was when I saw the thing in the trees and then the shadow that walked past the door that could have been like some kind of a Bigfoot or something.
Mm-hmm.
And then it warmed up almost after that because I was afraid to go outside. I wouldn't walk the dogs or the pig or anybody after dark for a long time after that. And, you know, as soon as it warmed up like that, like, the fear went away too. I don't know. It just feels different.
I just think that's really interesting because when they heat up, they have that difference in gravitational energy, that difference in gravitational pull. It's almost like, like with crystals and all that they can retain or they can release stone, like crystals can retain and release energy.
So, y'all, this is crazy. Tracy and I were recording, and right as we were finishing the very last part of my second story, she was starting to give me some tips for protecting ourselves better, and her phone just went haywire. It overheated, she lost service, and she was sitting right there with her partner, and everything was perfectly fine on his. So there's definitely something here that's telling us that it doesn't want us protecting ourselves. So with that being said, we are going to cut this episode short and end it here.
Thank you all for listening to another episode of Haunted Tea Podcast. We have merch available. It's through our Patreon, and also there's a link to the store on our Facebook page. There's a Facebook group, Haunted Tea Podcast, Ghostly Gossip. You can go on there and you can talk to other people. You can tell your own stories. And as always, we need all of your ghost stories emailed to us, every single one of them, or your alien stories, or your Bigfoot stories, or your cryptid stories, or your any kind of ghost story whatsoever. Send them all to us, hauntedteapodcast@gmail.com.
Hey, we want your stories from all year.
And we'll see you. We'll see you in the next episode with your Haunted Tea. Stay spooky, y'all.